Welcome my YouTube channel, Stoic Powerful Habits. Asterisk, ladies and gentlemen. Asterisk, there is a power often overlooked in a world that tells us to chase, cling, and fight for attention. Power is distance. Carl Jung once said, what you resist persists. And yet we spend our lives resisting detachment, resisting the silence, the void, the uncertainty of letting go. We fear that if we step back, we'll be forgotten. That if we give space, we'll be replaced. But nothing could be further from the truth. If your presence has value, your absence will carry weight. If your energy is rare, your distance will not be taken lightly. If your love is true, your silence becomes a mirror for the other to face their own reflection. This is the essence of Jungian psychology and Stoic power. The work is not in controlling others, is in controlling yourself. Let them go. Let them wander. Let them face themselves in the echo of your absence. Because in your distance, there is a mirror that shows them what life is like without your energy, your stability, your love, your patience. You see, the modern world has conditioned us to believe that love is in the pursuit, but real love, strong, grounded love is in presence. And when presence becomes unavailable, its value increases. That's economics. That's energy. That's psychology. The Stoics knew this truth. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, none of them ever spoke of chasing people. They spoke of mastering the self. They taught that emotions are like wild horses. You either ride them with discipline or get dragged through the mud of desperation. So how do we give distance? With calm, with dignity, with awareness. Distance is not a tactic. 'Tis a byproduct of inner power. You're not playing a game. You're not trying to get a reaction. You're living your truth. You're choosing peace over chaos. You're respecting your own worth so much that you can afford to let go. Carl Jung would call this shadow integration. When you become aware of your anxious tendencies, your need for control, your fear of abandonment, you take back your power. You no longer project your wounds onto others. You see them as they are, not through the lens of your trauma. This makes you magnetic. Why? Because most people are used to being chased, argued with, begged, and convinced. But when you give distance, you break that pattern. You become a question mark in their psyche. Why aren't they chasing me? Why aren't they reacting? Did they really let go? And in that silence, they come back. Or they don't. And either way you win because your peace is not tied to their return. It is tied to your own growth. The Stoic doesn't act for results. He acts from principle. So you give space not to manipulate, but because it's who you've become. Let them sit in the silence. Let them feel the loss. Let them wonder. Let them remember your consistency. Let them reflect on the storm you always calmed. And if they come back, it's not because you forced them. It's because they grew enough to return on their own. And if they don't, then your distance became a filtered, sacred boundary that preserved your power. So my message to you today is simple. Don't chase. Stand still. Don't explain. Evolve. Don't beg. Believe. Let them go. Let them face their lessons. And if your presence was real, if your love was pure, they will return. And when they do, they'll find a stronger, quieter, more radiant version of you. Unshaken, unattached, unapologetically whole. That's the Jungian way. That's the Stoic way. And that's your way from this day forward. Thank you. Stay powerful. Stay silent. Stay centered. Asterisk's true power is never in the grasp. It is not found in clinging or in the desperate reach for control. It is in the release. In the moment when a man no longer attempts to seize or hold, but quietly allows. That is when reality begins to bend. When you understand this, you begin to see that distance is not lost at its creation. It is the unseen sculptor's hand that shapes the unseen clay. To give someone distance is not to cast them away. It is to allow them the full experience of your absence so they may know the weight of your presence. When you try to hold too tightly to another, you disturb the natural order. You crowd the garden in which growth was meant to occur. But when you withdraw not in bitterness, not in punishment, but in poise, you shift the current. The same individual who once ignored your nearness will come to miss the silence where your voice used to be. Why? Because the energy has changed. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer reacting. You are resting in your own awareness. This is not a tactic. It is a transformation. Everything external is but a reflection of your internal state. When you chase, you are confirming the absence. You are living in a state of lack, and the world echoes your belief. But when you rest in stillness, believing deeply that all things are flowing towards you by right of consciousness, then you invite all that is yours to return not through force, but through inevitability. You must see distance not as an empty space, but as a sacred chamber where the unfolding takes place. That which you imagine with love and detachment will find its way to you. Distance, then, is not rejection. It is not punishment. It is sacred permission. It is saying to the universe, I do not need to push. I trust the process. I do not need to speak. I trust the silence. It is in this release that the other feels your absence, not as abandonment, but as depth. Okay. They meet themselves in the echo. Okay. In the stillness of no contact, their mind is no longer filled with noise. It becomes filled with memory. The moments shared, the feelings they buried, the truth they refused to acknowledge. It rises in the quiet, and where once they were certain, they begin to question. Where once they were distant, they begin to lean in. There's no need to force the hand of another when you understand how consciousness works. All things are drawn to their source. What you let go of in faith does not drift into oblivion. It completes its journey and circles back in time, often when you least expect it because you stop needing it. And that is when true power is, revealed not in the struggle, but in the surrender. Now consider what happens when you begin to work within, not as an exercise of discipline, but as a sacred return to your own center. To retreat from external obsession and turn the gaze inward is to enter the dimension where true change begins. It is not the world that must shift. It is you. Assumptions, your self-concept, your belief in your own worthiness. When those become stable, reality rearranges itself to reflect them. That is the law. It is unbreakable. There is a deeper law at play, and that law is mirrored through what some have called shadow work. But we will not name it. We will live it. You see, every individual carries within themselves a realm of unconscious impressions. These impressions dictate our reactions, our fears, our patterns. They shape how we relate to others, how we view love, how we treat distance. And until these impressions are brought to the light of awareness, we remain bound. We do not let go because we fear abandonment. We do not allow space because we fear the silence will prove we are unworthy. We chase because we fear they will never return unless we remain visible. But this is illusion. The true self has no need to chase. It radiates. It draws. Not because it performs, but because it is. And to reach this state, one must meet the shadows within. The fragments of the self that were buried in childhood, the fears that whispered, you are not enough. The echoes that warned, they will leave you if you are not perfect. These voices are not reality. They are recordings. And you, the conscious creator, may press stop at any time. You begin to master this work, not by condemning the shadow, but by integrating it. You sit with the wound, not to reopen it, but to understand its origin. You no longer see distance as punishment, but as purification. In the silence, you hear the old beliefs surface. They don't care about you. You're not worth waiting for. And instead of believing them, you observe them. You recognize them as echoes of prophecies. This is how you reclaim your energy. You stop projecting. You stop assuming. You stop casting others into the roles your wounds wrote. You let them be, and you return to yourself. You begin to see that the other is not your source of validation. They were a mirror of the parts you still questioned. When you answer those questions within, the mirror changes. Now something beautiful happens. When you no longer seek them in desperation, you find them in peace. They return, not because you chased them, but because your detachment became magnetic. They began to feel your calm. They began to sense the stability you've become. They remember the chaos they left behind, and they notice how still you've become. And in that stillness, there is a pull, not of demand, but of mystery. Mystery calls always. So do not fear the letting go. Do not fear the silence. Do not fear the space. It is in that sacred void where creation begins. The void is not empty. It is full of potential. When you stop pouring your energy into chasing, pleading, proving, you reclaim your power. That power becomes presence. And presence, even in absence, has a voice. It speaks. It calls. It draws. Do not underestimate the spiritual gravity of a mind at peace. The moment you step out of neediness and into knowing, everything changes. You are no longer the beggar of love. You are its source. You are no longer waiting for someone to return so you can feel whole. You are whole. And because you are whole, you become irresistible. They will feel it. They may not understand it, but they will sense it. Something about you has changed. You no longer reach out, and now they reach inward. You no longer try to convince, and now they begin to reflect. The same space that once felt empty now feels sacred. They remember, okay? And they return not to who you were, but to who you've become. And if they do not, then your growth is cleared. The path for what is greater. Either way, the one who releases with faith is never left in lack. For consciousness cannot be denied. It must reflect back what you assume to be true. And if your truth is peace, if your assumption is that all that is yours is returning, then you do not watch you prepare, okay? Not in anxiety, but in stillness. This is the great reversal, the paradox of power, that the one who gives distance in love receives return in truth, not through force, but through alignment, not by chasing, but by becoming. So give space, give silence, give stillness, and watch what is yours begin to find its way back. Asterisk detachment is so often misunderstood. People believe it means to stop caring, to shut off the heart, to become cold or indifferent to life. But detachment, in its truest and highest form, is not the death of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It is not indifference to outcomes, but clarity that the outcome already lives within you. You do not detach by turning away from what you love, but by releasing the fear that it will define you. You no longer say, I must have this to be fulfilled, but rather, I am fulfilled, and this shall find me, or something better still. Detachment is the stillness that flows from deep inner knowing, not the harshness of emotional distance. It is the gentle, powerful awareness that all things are drawn to the one who does not cling. When you cling, you strangle the flow of manifestation. You hold the dream hostage, and in doing so, you tell the universe, I do not trust. Act of needing something is the declaration that it is not yet yours. But the moment you detach not by abandoning the desire, but by embracing its spiritual reality, you allow it to form naturally in the world of matter. You do not stop loving the person. You stop begging for the love to prove itself. You do not reject the opportunity. You simply no longer pursue it with panic. You walk with the confidence of one who already holds it in unseen hands. This is clarity. It is not apathy. It is not the resignation of the disappointed. It is the peace of the realized. A man who knows the gold is buried 10 feet below does not dig frantically. He moves the earth with patient rhythm. He is already wealthy in his mind. And so each movement of the shovel is a formality. Such is the one who detaches in faith. Their calm is not a lack of caring. It's the presence of certainty. When you apply this to love, everything shifts. Instead of seeking validation, you become the source of it. Instead of chasing attention, you hold space. And in doing so, you change the entire energetic dynamic. The other feels this difference, even without understanding it. They feel your calm in a world addicted to chaos. They feel your self-possession in a world obsessed with approval. And because you are not leaning forward, they begin to lean in. This is the paradox. The one who stops grasping begins to receive. The one who is no longer desperate becomes desirable. The one who needs nothing invites everything. Not because they are playing games, but because they are aligned with the truth, all things. Flow to the one who rests in awareness. This detachment is magnetic, not because it is manipulative, but because it is rare. In a world where most are chasing, the one who is still becomes the flame. And so we move to the idea of absence, what it means when you are no longer visible, no longer speaking, no longer present in the life of the other. You begin to see that absence is not emptiness. It is amplification. It increases value because it reveals significance. When something is always there, it becomes ordinary. It blends into the background. Okay. But once removed, even the smallest things begin to shine. The tone of your voice, the steadiness of your presence, the way your energy created calm. When you step away, the other is left with what remains. Remains is memory. Memory becomes a powerful force in your absence. It is not bound by logic. It is emotional, alive, breathing. It recalls things not as they happened, but as they were felt. And so, in the silence, you create. A new presence is born not of your body, but of your essence. They begin to remember the peace you carried, the warmth you gave, the reflection they once avoided. And this remembrance becomes longing. When you understand this, you no longer fear absence. You begin to honor it as a spiritual force. Tana, punishment, not a manipulation, but a law. Just as light is best seen in darkness, presence is best appreciated in absence. The more emotionally intelligent you are in stepping back, the more impactful your presence becomes. The one who can walk away in faith is not abandoning. They are allowing. They are trusting in the fullness of what they once gave. You do not. Disappear in anger. You do not withdraw to provoke. You withdraw to honor. You honor your energy. You honor their path. You let them meet themselves in your silence. And you do so without fear. Because fear would mean you never truly believed. You mattered. But once you know your worth, your absence becomes a lesson, not a wound. Now something subtle begins to unfold. In their solitude, the other begins to reflect. Not always immediately, not always consciously, but the seed is planted. It grows in the silence you left behind. The need to fill that silence awakens the soul. They may distract themselves, may deny, but silence has a way of echoing louder than words. It is not empty. It reverberates with what was once shared. And so, your value is not diminished. It is magnified. To live in this way is to walk as the mystic walks. To trust not. The world of appearances. But the unseen ought to act not from reaction, but from vision. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to justify your retreat. You do not plead. You do not pursue. You simply know. And your knowing becomes your authority. Those who are meant to walk beside you will feel it. Then they will return out of guilt, not out of loneliness, but out of recognition. They will feel the shift, and they will move toward it. Caught your absence made them confront their own depth. Your distance did not push them away. It brought them inward, and that journey inward is the one that eventually leads back to you. You never lose what belongs to you by divine alignment. You only release it so it may return through truth, not attachment. And if it does not return, it is not rejection, it's protection. Your energy created space for something more refined. And so you bless it as it leaves, knowing you've made room for higher reflection. So you no longer fear stepping back. You no longer equate silence with failure. You understand the alchemy of absence. You know that presence is not always about physical. Nern is about the imprint you leave in another's soul. And that imprint cannot be erased by time, nor hidden by ego. It remains. And one day, when the noise fades, they will hear. This is why you remain calm. This is why you detach. This is why you give distance. Not to provoke a return, because you trust that all you have ever truly needed already exists within. You do not need to be seen to be remembered. Do not need to be heard to be felt. You do not need to prove yourself to be chosen. You already are. Let the silence speak. Let the absence teach. And let your calm become the voice they cannot forget. Asterisk, you are not meant to orbit anyone. You are not designed to spin around another, hoping to be chosen, seen, validated. You were born to be the center, not the center of their world, but of your own. When you reclaim this position, when you return to the throne of your own consciousness, things begin to align. That which once ran from you pauses. That which ignored you now notices. That which dismissed you begins to remember. The world you experience is not happening to you. It is responding to you. Every moment, every encounter, every delay in return is a reflection of your inner arrangement. You are not a passive being tossed about by external events. You are the projector, not the screen. When you understand this, you no longer chase people or beg for roles in lives that cannot hold your magnitude. You no longer seek outside yourself for worth. You sit at the center and become still. Stillness is not stagnation, just the command of one who knows. From this center, you do not plead for attention, you radiate presence. You are not waiting for someone to make you whole. You are already whole, and in that wholeness, you become magnetic. The one who moves from their center does not force, they attract. Not by personality, not by persuasion, but by the natural pull of alignment. The one who is centered cannot be ignored, because their energy is not scattered. Their attention is not dispersed. They are unified, inwardly composed, rooted. Others feel this without understanding it. They begin to orbit you. They sense the field of gravity around you, though they cannot explain it. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are being. And this beingness has a frequency and unmistakable signal in a world of noise. Those who wander will feel the stillness you hold, and something in them, however subconsciously, will remember it. Like a traveler who forgot the way home, they will sense a familiar calm in your presence. They may not admit it. They may not return at once. But the seed has been planted. Because you no longer orbit them, they begin to turn. There is no need for outward display. There is no need for loud declarations. The truth speaks in silence. The centered soul is a beacon without effort. It does not scream. It does not plead. It simply is. And because it is, the world must respond. That is the law. That which is impressed upon the inner world must express itself in the outer. You are not reacting to reality. You are creating it. And yet, there is another layer to this mystery. You must come to trust what cannot be seen, to let nature do its work. The world has taught you to act, to chase, to fix, to control. But you are called to something deeper. You are called to let go, not into chaos, but into order, the unseen order of the inner world. You must let the unseen take shape before the seen can conform. When you desire something or someone, there is a tendency to hold on with thought, to replay memories, to overanalyze their behavior, to strategize your return. But in doing so, you are not creating, you are resisting. You are not allowing flow, you are freezing the image. You become entangled in what is and blind to what could be. Let go, not in despair, but in faith. not to forget them, but to return to yourself. You cannot change the outer by wrestling with it. You must ascend to the inner, where the real work is done. The moment you release your grip, you step into the divine current, and that current is wise. It knows when to bring back and when to remove. It knows how to restore harmony in ways the intellect could never imagine. Letting nature do its work means you trust the unseen laws. You believe that what is truly yours cannot be taken, and what is not yours, no effort will ever secure. You are no longer planting seeds and digging them up to check their growth. You plant, you water, you let go. You walk forward in the faith that the garden will bloom, not by your constant checking, but by your constant knowing. This knowing becomes the soil. Your inner atmosphere determines the rate of growth. If you let fear rule, the seed withers. If you let belief reign, the seed expands. So you no longer ask when, you no longer ask how. You simply embody the feeling of fulfillment, and you let the outer catch up to the inner. This is not about being passive. It is about being aligned. Action will come, but it will be inspired, not anxious. You may be led to send a message, to make a move, but it will rise from the silence, not from the noise. It will come with peace, not panic, because it comes from the center. It will carry weight. There is no manipulation in this. There is no game. There is only creation. You are not trying to bring someone back through force. You are allowing their return through transformation. Your return to the center invites them to do the same. And whether they return or not is no longer the measure of your worth. Your worth is already established. Your wholeness is complete. And so, the return becomes a gift, not a requirement. In letting go, you do not lose. You make space. And the space is not empty, it is sacred. It is where the rearrangement occurs. What you thought was absence is preparation. What you thought was delay is refinement. There are forces at work beyond your comprehension, aligning timelines, clearing paths, opening hearts. And your only task is to remain faithful to the end you have seen in your mind. Letting nature do its work also means you do not interfere with the growth of another. You stop trying to make them see. You stop trying to awaken them before their time. Tease. You allow them the dignity of their own unfolding. Tease. And you trust that if their path is meant to cross yours again, it will do so at the perfect moment. Second too early, not a second too late. There is peace in this, a deep and quiet peace, because you know the universe is not random. It is precise. It is exact. It is just. And what is truly aligned with your inner state must come. So you release them in love. You bless them in thought. And you return to the vision. Not the old version of them. Not the old dynamic. But the new creation, the one formed in your inner world, now drawing near. You remain centered. You remain faithful. You remain open. But you no longer run after the outer to fix the inner. You work within. And the outer bows to the image you carry. In silence. That is your gift. That is your authority. That is your command. So you do not orbit. You do not cling. You do not push. You come still. You trust. You let nature do its work. And the world bends to the one who walks from the center. Asterisk, indifference, is not the absence of care. It is the quiet knowing of one who sees beyond appearances. It's not coldness. The one who moves in indifference has not ceased to feel. They have ceased to react. They no longer allow every external shift to dictate their inner weather. They have turned their gaze inward and found something more enduring certainty. Stillness. Truth. To be indifferent is to say, I do not need you to choose me for me to remain chosen. It is to know that value does not fluctuate based on how others respond. When you walk in this kind of energy, the world feels it. The moment you Stop overgiving, over-explaining, and overreaching. Something unseen realigns. That which once moved away pauses. That which overlooked begins to observe. Because your energy no longer says, please see me. It says, I see myself. You begin to notice how much time you once spent trying to prove, persuade, or fix. How much of your identity was tied to being understood, validated, accepted. But true spiritual maturity is the release of this need. It is not that you do not want love, it's that you no longer trade your power to receive it. The moment you no longer need their reaction, you have reclaimed your reality. Indifference is not turning your back, it's turning your energy forward. It is no longer living in their timeline. It is remembering that your reality unfolds by law, not by luck. You stop asking if they will return because you've returned to yourself. You stop chasing clarity in them because you have found clarity within, and this changes everything. You shift from being a seeker to being a source. Others feel the change before they understand it. The one who once answered every message immediately now pauses with purpose. The one who once overshared now speaks only what aligns, not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. They feel the absence of your previous desperation, and that absence creates space. In that space, they begin to wonder. And wonder is the seed of return. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You are choosing. This reversal is the key. It does not require arrogance. It requires awakening. When you see that your attention is a sacred currency, you stop spending it recklessly. You realize that not all connections deserve your energy. Some were only mirrors of a wounded self-concept. Once healed, you no longer recognize the reflection. It no longer fits. Now you live with quiet selection. You are no longer drawn to the chaotic, the unavailable, the inconsistent. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You seek resonance. Peace becomes your compass. And because you are no longer gripped by lack, you no longer fall for illusions. You are free. Free not because they changed, but because you did. Your indifference becomes a filter. What cannot meet your energy fades. What aligns with your growth remains. You are no longer moved by confusion, for clarity now lives in you. You are no longer triggered by silence, for you no longer fear your own. You are no longer swayed by emotional waves, for your anchor is internal. You stand in the stillness and allow all things to reveal their nature. Silence is not passive. It is the voice of power. The world may not understand this language, but the soul does. When you no longer argue, no longer chase closure, no longer fill every space with noise, you become undeniable. Because silence does what words cannot. It reflects, it reveals, it returns. When you choose silence, you no longer participate in old cycles. You stop feeding the pattern that kept you small. You stop reacting to every movement, every inconsistency, every emotional breadcrumb. You understand that your energy is not to be tossed into chaos, but to be directed with intention. And so you say nothing. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you would say no longer serves your future. Your silence is not punishment. It is purification. Cleans the field. It removes the unnecessary. It creates room for truth. Those who once relied on your reactions to feel control now feel disoriented. The script they wrote no longer works. They must face themselves now. And whether they evolve or exit, your silence made the path clear. There is wisdom in restraint. When you master the art of non-response, you are no longer owned by circumstance. You wait, not in fear, but in faith. You watch, not with judgment, but with awareness. You allow, not to be passive, but to be powerful. You create space for the higher version of the moment to emerge, because you know that all things unfold from the invisible, not from the immediate dot. In silence, you are not doing nothing. You are holding a vibration, frequency of dignity, of clarity, of strength. This frequency is not loud, but it is felt. It touches the subconscious of those around you. Hey, they may not understand why they begin to think of you again, why memories surface, why feelings return. But you know, you've stepped out of the noise and into the field. And the field moves mountains without a sound. You are no longer trying to be understood by the unconscious. You are no longer explaining your evolution to those who still live in reaction. You are not above them. You are simply ahead by vibration. And so you offer silence, not to shame them, but to invite them. If they can rise, they will meet you. If they cannot, you remain unmoved. There is a presence you carry when you no longer beg to be seen, when your silence is no longer reaction, but a state. When your energy no longer spikes in the face of rejection, but it remains composed. This is the presence that creates shifts. It does not demand respect, it commands it without a word. You begin to understand that every time you speak, you emit energy. Every time you react, you invest power. Every time you engage the old, you delay the new. And so silence becomes your strategy. Not because you are avoiding, but because you are creating. In silence, you sculpt the future. In silence, you release the old. In silence, you return to source. This is the paradox. You gain more influence, the less you push. You gain more clarity, the less you explain. You gain more respect, the less you seek approval. You are no longer seduced by urgency. You move on timeless ground now, and those meant for you will feel it. They will be drawn not to the noise, but to the stillness. Because the stillness is real, the stillness is rare. It's safe. You no longer chase understanding. You understand. You no longer fight to be heard. You hear. You no longer fear being forgotten. By force, but by essence. And that essence echoes in your absence louder than any speech ever could. So you allow your indifference to cleanse the attachments that were rooted in insecurity. You allow your silence to speak what your words no longer need to say. You become the quiet presence that lingers in the memory long after the moment has passed. And in this stillness, in this quiet, you rise.